So Pam, it's lovely to have you on the speak to you today. Could you possibly start and tell us a little bit about your transitions and introduce the topic to our listeners, please?
Thank you. Thanks, Lucy, and thanks so much to Enable for all the work that you're doing in this area and also for having me here today. My young disabled persons transition to adulthood bill aims to make the transitions from school and beyond much, much easier for young disabled people. We know that in Scotland right now we're failing far too many. So, for example, we know that by the age 16, most disabled people have the same aspirations as anyone else, but by the age 26, they believe nothing they can do can change their future. That, to me, is not something we can settle with. We can't accept that we are effectively losing hope from a group of people at such a young age when really they should be excited about what their future holds for them. We also look at the statistics in employment for disabled people and in particularly learning disabled people, and we know that we're not doing everything we possibly can to close the employment gap there. And that's another reason why I think all of the statistics and all of the data shows, and of course families are telling us day in, day out, that the transitions from being a young person to an adult just are not working. And so my bill is about giving young disabled people a fighting chance at their future.
It's really important that I guess it's trying to get it right for everybody, as you say, and for everyone to have an equal chance at life. And another question is, why are transitions so important to you?
So I can remember, I'm 41, right? So I need to think back a little bit of a time. But I remember when I left school, I remember how difficult my transitions were. I remember how hard they were for me, but crucially, I remember how hard they were for my mum and dad and my sister, actually. We had to fight pretty much for absolutely everything I got, and that story hasn't changed. Every time I talk to young disabled people and their families across Scotland, they're still saying that they've got to fight. There's a cliff edge, they fall into an abyss. These are the things that people are telling us. So when I was young, I had to defer my entry from school to university by 2 years because there wasn't a transitions plan put in place so that I would have the support I needed when I left school. See, when we finally got it sorted, I can remember the day sitting in my living room, and I remember the day we got it sorted and my mum turned to me and said, "I can finally be your mum, not your carer." And actually that is the bit that's most important to me, because the way things are structured just now across Scotland for transitions, people's families end up having to be project managers, and sometimes in some cases young disabled people themselves, they end up having to project manage their own life. That's not what we should be doing. We really should be spending our time at that point in our life getting excited about who we want to be, what we want to do when we grow up, not project managing a whole load of different agencies and organisations and making sure they're doing what they should be for us.
No, I can totally understand and relate to that, because my transition from I'm going to touch when I was back in primary to secondary. It wasn't fantastic, and even it was a wee bit worse going through secondary to college. But we, as you say, Pam, we kind of got it sorted. That it was a steady pace, but it took a long time. And it, as you say, it's not one of these things that we want to make hard. We want to make it an easy process.
And it doesn't need to be like that. It doesn't need to be hard. It just needs people to have clear responsibilities, including families and disabled people themselves. But I'd say they're pretty good at knowing what their responsibilities are and doing them. But agencies to have really clear responsibilities and obligations, and for each agency to understand other agencies' obligations, and for it to come together, and crucially at the right time. So I think we're often leaving this too late. So you've spoken about your transition from school to college. I think that we're starting those things very, very late. Some people are leaving school with weeks before they're going to leave school and they don't have a transitions plan in place. Now, you know, as someone who's been through this, and all the people out there who take an interest in this stuff, particularly families of disabled people, they know themselves how long it takes everything. Nothing happens overnight when it comes to disabled people. It takes ages to do things. Now, the fact it takes so long is something that also needs to be addressed. But the bottom line is we need to start this early, and we're not starting it early. So we don't have to have that difficult transition. Some of this is about just being clear about whose responsibilities are what, and that's what I think this bill does. There's obligations in sections of this bill on authorities like further education institutions, as well as education schools and local authorities, because it really does need a joined up approach to it. And the landscape right now is cluttered in that way. And that's why I think organisations just don't know, because it's almost like can't see the wood for the trees. There's so much. Actually, we need it much, much clearer. And I think this is what my bill would do.
As you say, Pam, it's ideal if an organisation can help this. And that, going back to my transition was made a wee bit easier with the help of Enable, because they came to my transition meetings and they helped, and they kind of sat with the school and said, right, this is what needs to happen. How can we help? So that's I suppose I'm coming at it at a different angle, but that's how my transition went. It started a bit ropey, but then it went smoother and smoother. And
sorry to interrupt you there, Lucy. Probably I'd hazard a guess that it got smoother because of the involvement of organisation, because of Enable, and this is I think another. We've got organisations out there who know how to do this, largely in the third sector, that are stepping up really where other services are failing. And so that is key as well. And actually co-production and shared conversations and involving many people in a young person's life is key to this bill as well. And the role of the third sector is fundamental.
And it's about having their voice in these meetings and not just leaving them out. And I know you've touched on it, but did you have a good transition yourself?
I'd say, I'd characterise, it's quite a long story actually, but I'd characterise it by it worked out all right in the end, right? But that wasn't by like design, that was by accident. That was just a case of my mum and my dad, and actually a few good people in the school that I went to as well. It was a really good school. I had a great school. I went to mainstream school. And I did have a good experience, but nonetheless, it was driven by a couple of people in the school and my parents literally fighting every single day and being faced with barrier after barrier, be it from school, be it from further higher education. Sometimes it was social work, and actually a lot of agencies need to come together to get this right. But it was really hard. It was tiring. It was exhausting. It was fight day after day. It was confusing. I remember people saying, well, you can't get this, but you could try this from this group of people, or this is how you access social care, or this is how you access the support you might need at uni. See, trying to navigate all that, it was so hard. Like trying to work out what everybody's responsibilities were really difficult. The other thing is I ended up staying on at school for an extra year and then spending a year working at home rather than going to university because of the delay, because of the problems in my transition. So that shouldn't happen. I had the grades to do what I had always wanted to do and go to university. I got an unconditional offer from Stirling University and couldn't take it for 2 years. And that's not okay. So it was fraught with delay, arguments, fighting, worry, exhaustion, all at a real time when my parents should have been excited about what I was going to do when I grew up, kind of thing, and how I was going to get out into the big bad world. And I should have been excited about what that would bring as well. But instead, it was just fight after fight after fight. And unfortunately, Lucy, the story hasn't changed in the 25, if I'm counting correctly, years since I've been at school.
Well, that's very interesting to say that, because I would relate to the saying you just said, that it was all right in the end, because we never thought as a family that I would ever get to university, but a couple of years ago I got a business diploma through the Breaking Barriers program from the Enable run, and that was the biggest achievement out of all this. Even though I've come so far from school, we never thought for for our 5 minutes that, you know, I'd ever get to graduate or go to university because I had a learning disability. But because of Enable and the work that they did, it happened, which was really, it's one of my proudest moments.
And you should be really proud of that. Not just because you should be proud to get the education and the qualification that you did, that is a significant achievement. But never forget as well, you and I, as disabled people, have started with a disadvantage. Like it's you know, society is not you know, by default we are disadvantaged. We need to fix that by design, and part of that process, I think, is legislation, which is why I've got my bill. So you've not just achieved something that is pretty special in itself. You've also done, you've gone above and beyond to get there, and actually we need to recognise that. So yeah, go you.
Thank you. What do you think what do you think is important to make a good transition for people?
So I think for an individual, what makes a good transition is time. So I've often said to people, not everywhere is accessible. We know that, right? So for example, I'm a wheelchair user. So access for me might be different for you, Lucy, right? But from my experience as a wheelchair user, not every building's accessible. But do you know what's really, really helpful when you don't have access? Information and time. And I actually think that's the same is true with transitions. It's not always going to be an easy road. Sometimes people don't have the immediate answers. But if you've got information and you've got time, and then you layer on top of that responsibilities, clear responsibilities of each different organisation that is part of someone's life at that point in time, then I think you can put together what I believe to be a really strong package of support around somebody that says, we have properly planned for this. We've started at an early point in time, which of course in my bill we're suggesting at least age 14, if not before. And that you're getting all the information you need. So there's provisions in the bill that says certain information needs to be provided. It's got to be inclusive communication. And that was changed between the first version of this bill that came into Parliament in session 5 by Joanne Lamont, my colleague Joanne Lamont, and again, I always try and put this on record when I get a chance. I'd like to thank her for everything that she did on this bill, and for inspiring me to take it forward as well. But there's aspects in there that say they initially didn't include some things around communication, and Joanne gave a commitment to addressing that, and of course parliamentary timetables took over, and I honoured that commitment that Joanne made. So it now includes the need for inclusive communication, but it also includes clear obligations on when people should start planning for this and who needs to be involved. And I think that's key. The other thing I think is important, and this is maybe is partly for the individual, but it's also about the kind of structural point around transitions. Accountability. Accountability is absolutely key, because part of the problem I think that we've got right now is nobody knows who to say the buck stops here. Nobody really knows that. And I actually think we need to be able to do that. And I've noticed since I started as an MSP in 2021, I keep saying recently, but it's actually time's going on. That's nearly 2 years. But when I started in this job, I've learned a lot. One of the things I've learned is that there is nothing sharpens the government's mind more than having to get a minister on their feet to defend the decision. And I think if we've got provisions in this bill, which we do, and I think they're really important ones, for a national strategy on transitions. So what's the strategy? What is it we want to do? So prepare that, develop that, have a real idea about what you want to do for young disabled people. Create it with them, of course. Then make sure the government and the minister reports on that, so that other parties and other members of parliament, indeed, including from the governing party, can hold the government to account on it, and make sure locally and within institutions that are part of a disabled person's life at the point of transitions, also know that they have obligations as part of that, and that plans need to be put in place. And those are the key, I think, aspects of what would deliver a more positive transition for disabled people, and effectively a better life outcome and a fighting chance.
I would 100% agree. What are the important principles that make a young person's transition better, do you think?
I think, so I said accountability a moment ago. I think accountability is actually a really, really important principle. And I think that starts from the individual. to the school, their education authority, the people around them who have obligations to them, right all the way up to what are government ministers doing and what is the government doing to make sure that we actually turn around the really poor outcomes that we've got right now for disabled people in Scotland in terms of employment or education, and also aspirations. So all of these things I think are important. So accountability is key. I also think it's really important to the human rights principles of participation in the panel approach, participation, accountability in there, of course, non-discrimination, empowerment, and legality, which is why, of course, the bill would fundamentally, hopefully, provide the legal part of it. The other parts of it are crucial too. So people should be able to not just participate in their own transitions, but participate in society. And actually, that's what transitions are for, because they're not a process in and of themselves. They are a means to an end. By definition, you are transitioning to something, and so that's really important. The non-discrimination aspect, I think that's key as well. I think we forget that actually the group of people we're talking about here have rights set out in the Equality Act. And too often we're probably not necessarily remembering that. And we need to bear that in mind. People with rights, us as rights holders, need to bear it in mind, and people who are obligated to provide rights and deliver rights also have to bear it in mind. And then empowerment, I think, is key. So we have to empower families. We have to empower, incidentally, as well, schools, further education and higher education to do the right thing. Part of that empowerment, I think, is being really clear about what the responsibilities are. To be honest, it's also a little bit about money. And of course, that's, there is a financial memorandum attached to my bill. And it's about empowering young disabled people to be able to live the life that they want and that they choose.
Perfect. When are you, what are you hoping to achieve with your bill?
Ultimately, Lucy, I want to change the law on it. Like I want the law to be changed to give disabled people clear rights to a transition process. So there is various different bits and pieces of legislation, and the committee that's looking at the bill just now has said that there's bits and pieces here, there, and everywhere on it. But actually, all of the reviews the government have done into it, so the government's own reviews have said you need one plan for one person. And right now there are several across several different pieces of legislation. That makes it really hard. So I'm hoping to make it much more accountable, easier, clearer, make information available to people at the right time, early, and support people through that process so that people no longer have to be project managers in their own lives or the lives of their family member, but in actual fact can get through an education, go on to what they do in the future and have a fighting chance at getting what they want out of it.
And how long do you think it will take to get to that place?
So there's quite a bit, there's quite a few things impact that, the answer to that question. So first of all, my bill just now is at stage 1 in committee. So what that means is there is a committee of the Scottish Parliament made up of all different parties, looking at every detail in my bill, taking evidence on it, asking people what they think of it. And if anyone listening or watching, listening to this or watching this, wants to get involved in it, please do tell the committee why it's important. I think the formal evidence taking has come to a close, but there is absolutely no harm in making sure that the people who sit on that committee understand the importance of it, especially because the government's changed a wee bit just now, there's been the reshuffle. There's going to be different people on that committee. So it's no bad thing to remind them again why it's important. So I'd encourage people to do that. If they want to know how to do that, there's information on my website, which is www.glasgowpam.scot, and really get involved in it. The next stage of that is that committee have to write a report, Lucy, so they will say what they think about the bill. Now, I hope they support the principles of the bill, and I hope that they recommend Parliament agree to that at stage 1. Then it goes to the chamber, and all MSPs get to vote on it at stage 1, and it's really a voting principle. Do you agree with the principles of this legislation? I'd like to think we can clear that stage. Anytime I've spoken to the government, they've said they are in support of the principles of the legislation. So I really do hope that they'll continue that support, and that we'll see that carried into stage 1. Then you have to go into what's called stage 2, which is an amending stage. So other members of Parliament can look at it and change bits of it. And I might indeed want to do some changes to it as well as even as the person that's brought the bill, because through the process of talking to people, sometimes you get ideas about you know, just you need to change this wee bit. So there's opportunities to do that, and we should use it. That can take 6-8 weeks, I think. It can take sometimes longer than that. Then the bill becomes amended, so whatever goes through is then the new bill, and then it goes to stage 3. So that's a long way of saying months, not weeks, possibly a year, I would guess.
It sounds a very lengthy process, but with a good intention and a good aim in mind. And lastly, what would it mean? What would that mean for young people? What would the difference? What difference do you think the bill could make to people's lives?
I think it could. I genuinely think it could give them the fighting chance they need. And I know I keep saying that, but really this is what it's about. So you said, and you and I discussed earlier on about the achievements, and you said what you've achieved. But to get a chance at doing that has been really, really hard, because a lot of young disabled people don't have a fighting chance because they're already disadvantaged. That's what this bill will do. And it will do that because it will bring together a clear purpose for a clear group of people to solve a really clear problem, which we know all the statistics tell us we've got a problem here, so we need to fix that. And the government are doing work, schools are doing work, councils are doing work, third sector organisations are doing work. There's a lot of good work going on, but we're still not changing the outcomes, and that's why I think we need to change the legislation on it. Key to it, I think, is the accountability point. So there's like the main parts of my bill that I think are so important. One is this accountability and the strategy and getting the minister on their feet to report to Parliament about it. The second bit is the obligation to produce a strategy. The third bit is the obligation to produce an individual plan for each person. And the fourth bit is this coordinating and talking and working together. That's key. And doing all that early enough. And I think those things will make the process of transitions far, far better for young disabled people, really give them a fighting chance in the future.
Well, thank you, Pam. It's been really lovely to chat to you about this, and I look forward to working with you again.
Thank you, Lucy. You too, and also Enable, and good luck in all the work that you're doing, and whatever the next part of your education or your work or your career takes you to. Good luck with it. Thanks.